My name is Claudette Jones, 62 years old, and tonight I sit at a wedding table with a name that has followed me longer than wrinkles or scars. Wretched. The word slips from Howard's sister's painted mouth, loud enough for the nearest guests to laugh on cue. My glass doesn't shake, but the stem digs into my fingers like a reminder that pain leaves grooves you can still feel decades later. The string quartet keeps playing, too sweet, too false, while the room waits for me to bow my head. I don't. I smooth the napkin across my lap once, deliberate. Across the table, my only son, Damien, 35 now, can't meet my eyes. His jaw ticks. His hand grips the chair the way he once did the doorframe as a boy when officers pulled me away. Beside him, his bride Vanessa tilts closer, whispering, already sensing the fracture in the performance of perfection around her. Hard cut. Steel cuffs bite my wrists. A child's cry splits the hallway. My name called once, then silence. That was the day the label wretched fused to my skin, burned in by those who needed me gone. They thought time would keep it sealed. Back to the hall, to chandeliers and crystal. I lift my glass. The pearls at my throat rest cool against skin that has carried chains heavier than jewelry. My voice is steady, low enough that the hush has to lean toward me. A toast, I say, to Damien and Vanessa. May your marriage be built on what does not crack when light strikes it. The quartet falters. Damien's knuckles whiten. Guests shift, unsure whether they are witnesses or accomplices. I was not the mother who left, I continue. I was the mother who was taken. Gasps ripple like a draft across linen. For a heartbeat, everyone sees the boy who once cried for me, and the man who now pretends I was never there. I drink slowly, set the glass down with the certainty of a signature. If I were still the woman they branded, this would be where I folded, eyes lowered, apology bleeding through silence. But she is gone. They buried her and forgot that in darkness, roots grow deep. Now I am here, 62 and unafraid, carrying scars like proof instead of shame. If it were your name dragged through rooms like this, and you were handed a glass as your only weapon, would you raise it? And if stories like this touch you, share your own and stay with roots and secrets. There's a seat here, waiting for your voice. The hum of the reception dimmed, though no one admitted it. Guests bent over plates, knives tracing patterns in half-eaten chicken, while my words lingered like smoke. I felt Damien across the table, head bowed, jaw tight. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He used to look at me like I was the whole sky. Now he studied the linen, searching for a way out that didn't exist. I had seen this script before. It started decades earlier, the night I married his father. My dress was borrowed, seams pinching at the waist, but I smiled as if fabric could hold forever. Howard's family smiled too, though their smiles cut. His mother leaned toward her sister, pitched just loud enough. She doesn't belong here. I laughed it off, blind with love. I thought marriage had carried me over some invisible threshold. I didn't know the ground beneath was already splitting. Little humiliations stacked like poker chips. A late bill? My fault. A wrong delivery? My oversight? Howard's lost hours? Blame the wife who drained him. I saved every receipt, folded them neat, ready to prove innocence. It didn't matter. In their eyes, my signature was already forged across every failure. Even motherhood could not redeem me. Damien was the marrow of my bones, the reason I breathed. I stayed up with him through fevers, patched his jeans, worked nights so his plate stayed full. Yet each act of care was twisted. She coddles him, Howard's mother sniffed, as if love were poison. She forgot picture day, so my son stood in a stained t-shirt while his cousins posed polished. That photograph landed in the family album, their favorite exhibit against me. Howard never intervened. His silence was a sharper betrayal than words. "You misheard," he told me. "They don't mean it." But I knew intent when I tasted it. Respectability is a banquet that requires a scapegoat. I was the meal. When the family trucking company began to collapse, corners cut like bruised fruit. Papers slid across counters with sticky notes. "Sign here." I refused again and again. It didn't matter. Someone forged my name. When men in suits arrived, they wanted a culprit dressed for ruin. Howard's family offered me on a silver tray. I remember the smell of rice on the stove the morning the knock came. Damien sat coloring at the table, blue marker staining his hand. I wiped mine on a towel already clean. The officers said my name like a verdict. Cold cuffs kissed bone while steam still rose from the pot. That sound, metal locking, is tattooed on my nerves. Damien rushed forward, fists tiny but fierce. "Mama!" His cry cracked the hallway. I shouted back, his name breaking from my throat, but Howard stood frozen, arms crossed. His mother pulled Damien away, syrup in her tone. "Don't look. She chose this." I begged for one more second, one more hug. Neighbors watched, whispering. Respectable people adore a spectacle. The courthouse was theater. Papers spoke louder than I could. Howard sat silent, eyes fixed on the bench's wood grain. His mother's pearls gleamed like trophies. The gavel fell, coffin lid final. Justice had nothing to do with it. Someone had to pay. Better the outsider, the wrong side of town girl, the inconvenient wife. From then on, they named me the wretched woman. At first whispered, then shouted, finally spit from Damien's mouth when he asked why I was gone. Howard told him, "She abandoned us." A simple lie rehearsed into fact. Prison was steel and stone, but the greater cage was silence. Letters I poured my soul into never reached him. I described bedtime stories, painted memories of his laughter. Most never left the mailroom. The few that did probably met the trash. Holidays passed unanswered. The first Mother's Day, I asked the guard 3 times if mail had come. Nothing. By the 3rd year, I stopped asking. Other women wept over crooked hearts drawn by their children. I held my face still. Silence hardened into something sharper. Shame first, then fury, then resolve. At night, I lay on my bunk, replaying that doorway. Damien's knuckles white on the frame. In my mind, I broke free, ran to him, scooped him up. But memory is a cruel warden. It locks you in the moment you failed. I watched women crumble, numb themselves with contraband, carve skin to feel alive. I chose rage as fuel. I studied in the library, copied passages by hand, devoured any book that promised a way forward. Knowledge was currency even chains could not steal. When the gates opened years later, freedom felt hollow. No Howard, no Damien, only gravel underfoot and a plastic bag of state-issued clothes. The state handed me $40, the price of a life dismantled. I took a bus ticket to nowhere, rented a bed in a halfway house where walls sweated and rules suffocated. I scrubbed motel toilets, flipped burgers until my back screamed, mopped office floors humming to keep silence from swallowing me. Every application asked, "Felony?" Yes. Watch the smile vanish. Respectability doesn't forgive scars. Still, I saved every penny, skipped coffee, walked instead of riding buses. When I finally turned a key in a one-room apartment, I cried. Not joy, dignity, my door, my lock, my space. Whispers trailed me. That's her. Cashiers counted change twice. Shame shadowed every errand. But I straightened my spine. They thought the wretched woman would wither. They didn't know roots grow deeper in the dark. One night, pushing a mop across marble, I overheard two assistants. "Half my rent in a weekend," one bragged about a site called Airbnb. My ears burned. That night, I borrowed a camera, scrubbed my room until it gleamed, posted pictures online. Within days, a couple booked. They handed me cash, left a glowing review. For the first time, money came without disdain. Hope trickled, then flowed. I expanded, painted walls, rearranged furniture, studied photography, learned hospitality. Reviews stacked like bricks. Each stranger was a step toward freedom. When my lease ended, I upgraded to a 2-bedroom, lived in the small room, rented the big one. People laughed, but I saw a ladder. 2 years later, I had enough to lease a house, then another. Quietly, carefully, I built an empire in shadows. No billboards, no magazines, just keys heavy in my pocket and deeds tucked into files. By my 50s, I owned properties in cities Howard's family had never visited. They still called me invisible. I preferred it. Power tastes sweeter revealed at the right time. Yet even as I stacked victories, Damien's ghost lingered. I drove past his neighborhood, slow enough to see lights in his windows. I never knocked, never called. But my heart raced each time, wondering if he still believed the lie. Aunt Louisa told me I didn't need to prove anything to him. She was right, but scars don't listen to reason. For years, I waited, silent, building, until one afternoon the phone rang, a number I didn't know. His voice, older, sharper, but unmistakable. "Claudette," he said, refusing the name that tied us. "I'm getting married. Of course, you'll want to be there." Then the sneer. "You'll sit in your rags and they'll see the truth, the wretched woman." He thought it would break me. He didn't know he had just handed me my stage. The line had been drawn the moment Damien's voice cracked through the phone, venom wrapped in the word wretched. He thought it would bind me again, chain me to shame as it once had. Instead, it crystallized into something else, a boundary. I hung up with laughter under my breath, not hysteria, but steel. For decades I had bent, twisted, endured. That call was the first time in years I realized I could simply say no. No to his script, no to their narrative, no to the burial they demanded. But saying no is never clean. It costs. That night, I sat in my study surrounded by documents, deeds, and ledgers that told a story no one outside my circle knew. The city lights stretched beyond the window, sharp as shards of glass. I pulled open a drawer I rarely touched. Inside was a faded photo of Damien, 5 years old, his hand clutching mine, smile wide enough to light a block. My chest tightened. I traced the edges, then slipped it back into the box. Love had carried me, yes, but love alone could not walk into that wedding. Resolve would. So I began to prepare, not with tears or trembling, but with precision. My first call was to my head of security. "I need 2 of your best," I said, discreet, polished, unshakable. He didn't ask why. He knew. Then came the car. Not just any car, but a Rolls-Royce Ghost, silver as moonlight, its hum like secrets waiting to be spoken aloud. The symbolism was deliberate. I would arrive as the ghost of their past, but dressed in triumph. Clothes mattered too. I went to a private tailor. He measured not only my body, but the way I stood, the slope of my shoulders, the tilt of my chin. I chose a navy suit cut so sharp it could slice through pretense, heels that clicked like a metronome of power, and pearls, understated but unmistakable. I wanted every detail to speak before I opened my mouth. It wasn't about vanity. It was about reclaiming the stage they thought they owned. In the quiet that followed, I rehearsed, not words, but silence. I reminded myself that control is often what you do not do. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would not collapse. I would stand. I would speak. I would let truth walk the room on its own legs. But the past doesn't release you without clawing back. Within days of that phone call, whispers began to stir. Howard's sister, ever the messenger of malice, left a voicemail dripping with false concern. "Claudette, we hope you'll dress appropriately. It would be such a shame if you embarrassed Damien on his big day." I deleted it without reply. No had already taken root in me. Still, the old reflex to defend myself flickered. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, testing explanations that no one had asked for. "I didn't sign those papers. I never abandoned him." They lied. The words clanged hollow. Explanations had been my currency once, and it had always bankrupted me. Not anymore. Silence was the new wealth. The closer the wedding loomed, the sharper the pushback. Howard sent an email, short and cruel. "If you show your face, don't expect civility." For a moment, my chest caved. Decades of their contempt pressed down. The old Claudette might have folded, stayed home, wept into her pillow. But I printed the email, folded it into my pocket, and carried it like armor. Evidence of the lines they still tried to draw around me. I told myself again and again, their no to me was the soil my yes grew in. One evening, as I finalized details, Aunt Louisa sat across my kitchen table, eyes sharp behind her glasses. She sipped tea, lemon rind floating like a tiny sun. "Child," she said, "you sure about this? You don't owe them your presents." "I'm not showing up for them," I said. "Then for who? For me?" I answered. The words surprised me with their certainty. She studied me, then nodded. "Then walk in tall. But remember, sometimes dignity is the loudest word in a room. Don't let anger make you small." Her words clung to me in the nights that followed. The day came, dressed in sunlight too perfect, air still as if the world was holding its breath. I slid into the ghost, the leather cool against my skin. My guards rode ahead and behind. As we approached the venue, guests shimmered in silk and champagne. The engine's growl turned heads before the car even stopped. When my driver opened the door, silence spilled across the courtyard. One guard stepped out, tall and stone-faced. The other scanned the crowd. Then I stepped onto the pavement. My heels struck stone with deliberate rhythm, pearls glinting at my throat. Gasps rippled. The bride's family smiled, unaware. On the other side, Howard's face flushed crimson, his mouth falling open as if he had seen a ghost. And Damien, my son, my accuser, stiffened. His smirk drained away, knees weak, hand gripping the back of a chair. He hadn't expected this. He had expected rags and shame. Instead, I stood before him armored in survival. I walked slowly, letting every step echo. My presence, not my guards, silenced the room. Vanessa blinked at me, uncertain. I reached her, extended my hand. "Congratulations," I said evenly. "I'm Claudette Jones, Damien's mother." The air froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Glasses trembled. Vanessa's grip was tentative, her eyes wide. I didn't know you'd be here." "I wasn't supposed to be," I said. Damien's lips parted, but no words came. This was my no-made flesh, refusing to disappear, refusing to be silent. At the table, Howard's sister couldn't resist reclaiming the script. She clinked her glass, voice syrupy. "We're so proud of Damien, proud that he found it in his heart to invite his mother. It takes such grace to forgive." Laughter, condescending, bubbled. I felt the old urge to shrink, to swallow words. Instead, I rose. I lifted my glass, my voice steady. A toast. To Damien and Vanessa. May your marriage be built on truth, not lies. I paused, then let the blade fall. Because lies, no matter how polished, always crack under time. Gasps broke. Forks clattered. Damien shifted, color draining from his face. His hand trembled on his thigh. Howard stared down at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. The silence that followed was louder than any orchestra. That was the cost of no. It wasn't applause or vindication. It was standing in the storm you create, holding steady as the winds roar. I could feel the judgment, the whispers, the searing eyes. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. Then came the retaliation. Damien surged to his feet, voice breaking. You think this is your stage? You think you can ruin my day? His face flushed, veins rising, hand stabbing the air. You abandoned me. You'll never be more than what you've always been. Never. Guests shrank back. Vanessa froze. The perfect groom unraveled before their eyes. He thought he was shaming me, but in his fury, he exposed himself. His anger was fire. My calm was stone. The contrast was undeniable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, soft but cutting, Sit down, Damien. You're only proving what I already knew. The words hit harder than any scream. His chest heaved, his eyes darted, the truth cornering him in a hall full of witnesses. He faltered. But I knew this wasn't the end. The storm had only begun. My no had cracked the facade, and cracks always spread. The cost would come. Threats, letters, blame. But the line was drawn. For the first time, I had said no and stood. And as the music stuttered back to life, as whispers thickened into judgment, I realized the reckoning wasn't just beginning for them. It was beginning for me, too. The storm did not end when the music started again. Damien's outburst had cracked something deeper than the chandeliered air above us. Whispers slid under the tablecloths, eyes burned into my back. I held my glass steady, but inside, the ground tilted. I could hear the string quartet struggling through a cheerful piece, notes shrill, desperate to patch what could not be patched. I did not stay for cake or speeches. I left the hall with my guards, heels tapping a rhythm that pretended strength. Outside, the night air felt colder than it should. My breath fogged like smoke, though the air was clear. As the Rolls-Royce door shut, I let my hand rest on the cool leather seat. The engine hummed, steady, unlike my pulse. By the time I reached home, messages already waited. My phone pulsed with venom. Texts from numbers I didn't know. Shame on you. Stay away from Damien. You ruined his wedding. Someone had posted a photo, me raising my glass, captioned with the word, wretched. The comments swarmed beneath, strangers stitching my history into new rumors. I scrolled, my thumb shaking. Each word sliced. For decades, I had lived in silence, power built behind curtains. Now, my face was everywhere. They had wanted me erased, and now they wanted me crucified. The irony made my stomach twist. That night, I could not sleep. I sat at my desk, city lights flickering beyond the window. I tried to read my ledgers, the pages once a comfort, numbers steady as heartbeat, but the figures blurred. My reflection in the glass did not look triumphant. It looked hunted. A knock startled me. 3 slow raps on the door. My guards shifted in the hallway. I opened it to find an envelope slid beneath. No address, no name. Inside, a photocopy of my mugshot from decades ago, creased and smudged, with one line scrawled across it. Once wretched, always wretched. I pressed the paper flat on my desk. The face stared back. Me, younger, eyes hollow, chains across my wrists. The old shame clawed its way up my throat. For the first time in years, I buried my head in my hands and let the sob rise. Not delicate tears, deep, raw sobs that cracked ribs. Alone in that study, I felt like the woman they had dragged away, not the one who had built an empire brick by brick. Sleep came only in scraps. Each time I closed my eyes, the past ambushed me. The clang of cell doors, the smell of bleach in prison halls, guards tossing my letters into bins, Damien's silence on every Mother's Day. I woke gasping, sweat slicking my back, heart galloping. My stand, suddenly seemed fragile, a glass raised in a room too eager to shatter it. By morning, headlines bloomed. Local blogs, gossip sites. Estranged mother crashes son's wedding, from prison to scandal. The word wretched threaded through them all, like ink spilled across pages. My phone buzzed with reporters, some demanding comment, others offering sympathy. I turned it face down. I thought about staying in bed, drawing curtains, letting the world feast. Old instincts returned. Hide, apologize, disappear. For hours, I sat motionless, robe wrapped tight, the mugshot still on my desk. Shame can be louder than truth when it echoes inside your skull. By afternoon, Aunt Louisa appeared. She didn't knock politely, she hammered. My guard opened, and there she was, coat buttoned wrong, hair tied back in a scarf. She carried a grocery bag heavy with lemons and tea. She pushed past me, muttering, "You look like you haven't eaten. Sit down before you fall down." I sat, because I had no fight left. She unpacked slowly, lemons rolling on the counter, the clink of a kettle filling, the scrape of a chair. Finally, she sat opposite me, her eyes sharp, her mouth set. "I saw the papers," she said. "I heard the noise, but noise isn't truth." I didn't answer. I stared at the mugshot, flat on the desk. She reached over, tapped it with a finger. "That woman is gone. You buried her years ago. Don't you let them dig her back up." Her words cracked something. "They'll never see me as anything else," I whispered. "Then stop trying to make them see," she said. Her tone was firm, but her hand pressed mine, warm. "You've built enough proof. You don't need their eyes. You need your own." We sat in silence until the kettle screamed. She poured, dropped lemon slices, slid a mug to me. The steam curled, sharp and clean. I wrapped my hands around it, trembling. "You think survival was the end," she said softly. "It wasn't. Survival was training. Now you fight different." Her words lingered long after she left. That night, I sat with the mugshot once more. I didn't shred it. I didn't burn it. I slid it into a folder labeled past. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out deeds, contracts, emails, evidence of what I had built. My empire wasn't a fantasy. It was ink, signatures, stone, and mortar. The whispers wanted me erased. The papers wanted me mocked. Damien wanted me shamed. But none of them had walked the nights I scrubbed floors, studied by library light, saved pennies until they grew into thousands. None of them had turned strangers into shelter, rooms into revenue, failure into foundation. I told myself aloud, voice hoarse but steady. They can call me wretched, but they cannot call me broken. It wasn't victory. It wasn't peace. It was a flicker, an ember refusing to die. The next morning, I rose before dawn. I dressed not in armor, but in simplicity. Slacks, a blouse, my hair tied back. I drove to a property under renovation. Dust clung to the air, sunlight cutting through gaps in the boarded windows. Workers paused when I entered. I gave instructions, signed checks, asked questions about wiring, plumbing, costs. My voice shook at first, but steadied with each word. Work was my language, the one they couldn't twist. By noon, plans were moving again. My lungs filled easier. Shame loosened its grip. Still, I knew the storm hadn't passed. Damien's rage was only beginning. Howard's family would not retreat quietly. There would be letters, perhaps lawsuits, more articles, more poison. But for the first time since the wedding, I felt my spine stiffen. I had stumbled, nearly fallen back into silence. Louisa's words had pulled me upright. That night, I stood at the window of my study. The city glowed. I lifted a glass, not of wine, but of water, and whispered, "To truth that survives storms." My reflection looked back, not triumphant yet, but lit with a small, steady fire. And as my phone buzzed again, another unknown number flashing, I didn't flinch. I knew the battle was coming, but this time, I was ready to answer. The city had always whispered about me. Now, it roared. After Damien's wedding, articles multiplied like weeds. Wretched woman crashes reception. Mother humiliated by her son. Each headline bent toward their script. But this time, I wasn't going to let the lies stand. Louisa's voice anchored me. "You don't need their eyes. You need your own." So I opened the folder I had labeled past and pulled out its opposite, proof. Inside were contracts, deeds, tax filings, renovation invoices, bank statements. They were dry to most, but to me they sang. Every page was a testimony that I had not been idle, not been broken, not been erased. For years I had built in silence. Now silence had turned against me. It was time to let paper speak. The first step was simple. I called my attorney, a woman named Carter who had once handled a zoning dispute for me. Sharp, concise, allergic to nonsense. "I need a file prepared," I told her. "Property holdings, rental income, everything. Neat enough that even a gossip columnist can't misread it." She hesitated. "Are you sure you want to go public? You've stayed under the radar for decades." "I didn't step into that wedding to disappear again," I said. "If they want a spectacle, I'll give them one. Just not the show they wrote." Within days, I had binders lined up across my desk. Black spines labeled with white tape. Chicago, Charlotte, Houston. Each opened to pages of deeds stamped and notarized. I ran my hands over the raised seals, cool under my fingers. Each one was a blade honed from years of silence. Then I made another call. Not to the press, but to a community center where I had quietly funded renovations years earlier. The director answered with warmth in her voice. "Claudette, it's been too long. I need a space," I said. "One big enough for a meeting, something public." "Of course, you saved our center. Name the day." I chose a Saturday. Invitations went out not to society pages, but to contractors, neighbors, tenants, small business owners who had rented space from me. People who had seen me show up, pay fairly, keep promises. I wanted witnesses rooted in truth, not bloodlines. The hall filled that morning with folding chairs, the smell of coffee, the sound of children in the next room. Sunlight pooled across the floor. I stood at the front table, navy suit pressed, pearls gleaming steady against my throat. My guards flanked the doorway, silent shadows. When the crowd quieted, I laid the binders down. "They call me wretched," I began. The word no longer cracked against my skin. "They say I abandoned my child, that I crawled through life in disgrace, For years, I let them tell it. Today, I tell mine. I opened the first binder. Deeds gleamed. Bank statements rustled. Receipts bore signatures not forged, but earned. I didn't shout. I didn't weep. I showed. Pages turned. Evidence stacking like bricks. People leaned forward, murmuring. The weight of silence shifted. No longer heavy with shame, but heavy with recognition. Reporters had come too, curious whether I would crumble. Their cameras clicked, lenses catching paper, pearls, eyes steady. The story was no longer just rumor, it was record. Halfway through, a disturbance at the back. Howard's sister swept in, lips curled, Damien at her side. His suit was wrinkled, tie loose, the groom stripped of glamour. Gasps rippled. He had come to reclaim the stage. "You think these papers change anything?" he shouted, voice hoarse. "You think money makes you a mother? You can't buy what you lost." I closed the binder gently, palms flat. "I never lost myself," I said. "You abandoned me," he spat. "I remember." "Do you?" My voice was calm. "Do you remember me signing papers I never saw? Do you remember me choosing chains over you? Or do you remember what they told you to remember?" His mouth opened, but the words tangled. I turned to the audience. This is what lies do. They rot memory. They twist love until it tastes like poison. But lies don't outlast paper. They don't outlast proof. I lifted a deed, its seal catching light. Every key I turned was proof. Every room I built was proof. Every name they tried to bury, I signed back into existence. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled. Damien's face burned crimson. "She's twisting everything," he cried. "She's manipulating you just like she tried with me." A tenant stood, a woman in her 50s. "She gave me a lease when no one else would. Fair rent, fair terms. If that's manipulation, I'll take it." Another voice, a contractor. "She paid on time, never cut corners, unlike some." His eyes flicked toward Howard's sister. The tide turned with the weight of testimony. One by one, voices rose, not polished speeches, just truths, a ripple of affirmation. Damien floundered, his fury shrinking against their steady words. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Truth carried itself. Howard's sister hissed, "This isn't over." "No," I said softly. "It's just beginning." The meeting ended with applause, not raucous, but firm, like hands pounding nails into a new frame. I stood taller than I had in years. Afterward, reporters swarmed. "Do you forgive your son?" one asked. I met the lens straight. Forgiveness isn't today's work. Truth is. That night, alone in my study, I replayed the day. The photo of Damien as a child still lay in its box. I opened it, looked once, then closed it again. My boundary held. Emails flooded in by morning, some supportive, some venomous. But one stood out. A scanned copy of Howard's old financial records, sent anonymously. I recognized the handwriting. Numbers altered, signatures mismatched. Evidence that confirmed what I had claimed all along. I had been framed. I printed the file, hands steady. This was not just vindication. This was ammunition. The next week, I scheduled a press conference. Cameras crowded, microphones pointed. I stood flanked by my attorney. Behind me, the documents projected large signatures side by side, forgery undeniable. Carter explained the findings in crisp terms. Fraud, fabrication, false witness. The room buzzed, reporters firing questions. I answered only one. "Why speak now?" I paused, pearls cool against my skin. Because silence was survival. But survival is not enough. My son believed a lie. The world repeated it. Today, I choose no. The flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Howard's family, watching from shadows, had no counter. Damien, somewhere out there, felt the ground tilt beneath him. I walked off the stage, heels steady. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just surviving lies, I was dismantling them. But victories draw blood. That evening, another envelope slid beneath my door. Inside, a single sentence typed in bold. Stop, or you'll regret it. My fingers tightened around the paper. Threats had once broken me. Not anymore. I set it aflame in the sink, watched the ash curl. The war was here, and I had just declared I was ready to fight it to the end. The letter crumbled into ash, edges curling like black petals in my sink. I watched until every word dissolved, until threat became dust. The air smelled faintly of burnt ink, sharp but strangely clean. Once, such a warning would have sent me into hiding. Now, it confirmed I had struck where it hurt. The enemy only threatens when they feel power slipping. Days passed, then weeks. The noise outside rose and fell like tides slapping at seawalls. Headlines screamed, critics circled, neighbors whispered. Some cheered me, others spat my name. But through it all, I held my line. I kept working. Properties opened, tenants moved in, keys clinked in my palm. Every turn of a lock reminded me, I was not the wretched woman they wanted me to be. I was the woman who built, who endured, who stood. Still, the wound with Damien pulsed. One evening, I received a message through my attorney. He wanted to meet privately. I agreed, not from hope, but from duty to closure. We met in a quiet office downtown. The blinds were half closed, city lights spilling stripes across the table between us. He looked older than he had at the wedding, jaw heavy, eyes bloodshot. For a moment, I saw the child who once reached for me through the doorway. Then I remembered his voice on the phone, calling me wretched, planning my humiliation. He cleared his throat. You embarrassed me. You've destroyed everything. I didn't flinch. No, I revealed what was already broken. His fists balled, then loosened. Why couldn't you just stay gone? Because gone was never the truth, I said, and I won't live inside a lie. Silence stretched. He stared at the table, jaw working. For a heartbeat, I thought he might soften. But when he lifted his head, anger still smoldered. You'll never be my mother again. I nodded once. Then that chapter is closed. My voice was steady, though my chest ached. I don't hate you, but I no longer love you either. That bond died when you chose their story over mine. He blinked, eyes wet, but no words followed. I rose, pearls catching the faint light, and walked out. My heels struck the tile in the same rhythm they had on his wedding day. Steady, certain, final. Outside, the night was sharp with winter air. I inhaled, the chill slicing clean. For the first time, I felt the boundary set solid between us. Not hatred, not vengeance, just truth. In the weeks that followed, the threats waned, the press moved on. My silence no longer meant erasure, it meant choice. I worked, I grew, I lived. The empire I had built in shadows now stood under light, not for spectacle, but for survival made visible. Sometimes I still open the small box with Damien's childhood photo. I trace the grin, the small hand clutching mine. I grieved the years stolen, the love poisoned, but grief didn't crush me anymore. It reminded me I was human, not stone. And then I closed the box, set it back in the drawer, and returned to my life. Aunt Louisa sat with me one afternoon, sipping tea at her kitchen table. Child, she said, you've carried storms, and you've carried silence. Now carry peace. I smiled faintly. I'm learning. She patted my hand, the lemon scent of her tea curling in the air. Peace isn't forgetting. It's walking on without chains. Her words stayed with me. When I look back now, I see cages and courtrooms, lies and headlines. But I also see keys, contracts, rooms filled with travelers, neighbors who found homes. I see a woman who refused to vanish. They called me wretched. They tried to bury me in shame, erase me from my son's life. For years, I carried that brand. But scars tell stories. Mine tells one of survival and dignity. The truth is simple. I was not the woman they said I was. I am not the woman they wanted me to be. I am the woman who rose anyway. So let the world remember me however it chooses. As a ghost, as a scandal, as a mother who shattered her son's perfect day. None of that matters. What matters is that I stood. I spoke. I survived. Love without respect is only an echo, but dignity carries. It lasts. And as I close this chapter, I leave you with this. If your name has ever been dragged through dust, if your voice was silenced, if you've been told you are less, know that silence is not the end. Stand, speak, build again. And if this story finds you, share your own with us. Let your scars tell their truth. And if journeys like mine move you, join me at Roots and Secrets. Subscribe, comment, and bring your voice to the table. There is room here for every story that refuses to stay buried.